Meet Tara. It's Christmas dinner, and it hits her that everyone's quiet because they're waiting for her to respond. Her father repeats what he said a moment ago. Sweetheart, you've worked there for 6 years and they've taken good care of you. Why would you leave now when you have so much going for you? Tara, unsure of how to respond, scoffs and says, I don't know, I'm still thinking it over. Tara feels torn because just this week she received an offer to join a startup as a senior account manager, and the opportunity excites her. She could build her own team, implement new ideas, and grow into a leadership role. The hesitation is due to the fact that she's been with this leading cloud services company for over 6 years, and leaving sounds daunting. Why would she leave a well-established, well-known organization that offers growth opportunities? Well, lately it's been difficult. For instance, Tara has tried to address an internal issue with incorrect reporting, and while that might seem minor, it presents a false picture of how each account manager is performing. And every time she brings it up to leadership, they assure her they're working on it, but nothing ever changes. So Tara started exploring new opportunities, reaching out to her network, and one conversation led to another, and she was interviewing for the senior account manager role at the startup. She felt invigorated by the leadership's vision and the fact that they wanted her input to develop creative solutions. And when she shared this with her father at Christmas dinner, his response left her feeling guilty and unsure of taking on this new path. His points about loyalty and what she's already invested in the company struck a chord. Throughout her career, Tara has let other people make decisions for her. Her first job out of college was through an internship, which led her to connect with a leader who offered her the position she's in now. And over the last 6 years, she's done little to brand herself on LinkedIn or seek out new opportunities. You could say she's been coasting for the past 6 years. And now she feels stuck, torn between a great new opportunity and not wanting to be disloyal to her current leader or organization. Today, I'll be discussing Tara's dilemma with Geoffrey Roche, an expert on workforce transformation. Geoffrey has shared his expertise on leadership, personal branding, and workplace culture at the Forbes Business Council and as host of the podcast Holistic Leadership, the Future of Work and Education in Healthcare. I look forward to hearing how Geoffrey would advise Tara to weigh her options and make the best decision for her career. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Geoffrey, in our previous conversation that we had, you were telling me a story, and it had to do with what helped you to realize how important it is for you to have your own personal brand, to have your own autonomy, not have your identity tied up, in one company or one leader. And I want to just ask if you could share that story, because I thought it was a really good story. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah. So, in many ways, I learned that experience serving in the same organization for a decade. And when I was there, it's the job I started my career at. It's a job I grew multiple times, multiple promotions. And truly, I loved every aspect of that job. It's also where I met the best leaders. And, I saw when our organization went through what they called a merger process, but really it was more of an acquisition of us process. I saw so much change in those 2.5 years. I saw us start from a position of strength and a position of excitement. And I saw us then end with basically being told, you're now part of us and you're going to follow what we expect. And what I faced in that part was I went from a job that I loved to being minimized to feeling I didn't have any sense of belonging. And it was really in that experience where I learned ultimately, where my position was eliminated as part of that restructuring, that I had so much of my personal brand, my identity in that job. I didn't have that identity and brand as me, as Geoffrey. I had it in that job. And literally after, 10 years, this new organization in one night swept it away and just pulled the rug away from me. And
Hmm.
after that experience, I learned, I remember sitting back during my severance and saying, I'm a younger professional, having my second son at the time, had this, change, which many of us face in our careers, and said, you know what? I'm going to just really focus on me. And I'm going to make sure that I go out and really identify, develop my personal brand so that I said, as I take on the next job, I'm not going to be beholden to them. I'm not going to work every day as if I'm a company person. I'm going to
Hmm.
work every day, do the best that I can for them, contribute at the highest value for them, but I'm also going to contribute for me. And I'm going to really make sure that the constituencies, the stakeholders that I work with get to see the value that I bring. Yes, as employed by that organization, but also in the work that I do, and then I'm a unique value contributor. And that's really, what I learned in that experience.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the struggles that so often people have in finding that balance too. Because you alluded to it as you were describing it. You said, I still contribute everything I have. I still give my best. It doesn't mean that, hey, if I'm now on the side of I want to care about myself, my own personal brand, that I don't care about the company anymore. There's the binary thinking that we fall into, but that's not really how it is. So how do you find that balance? I mean, if you were to consider, for anyone who is working at a company where they have some of that loyalty in them, they want to show themselves as someone who does really care, but they also want to be sure that they're caring for themselves and their own career progression. How do you find that balance within yourself?
Yeah. It's not easy. And what I have told people is, in many ways, it comes through experience. And in some cases, it definitely comes through facing, that difficult either experience, rejection, elimination, for example, redirection. So, what I tell people though is that ultimately, when you do harness that part of you and you really put that forward, you find actually that you have more enjoyment in the work that you do, because ultimately you're not you're not at that kind of beck and call of just the organization. You're thinking more entrepreneurial. You're thinking about how, yes, the work that you do is absolutely contributing to the mission, vision, values of the organization that employs you. But at the same time, you're doing purposeful work that also relates and connects with who you are. And so that's what I generally tell people to do, is really, kind of channel that energy into what your purpose is. Because even in work that I do today, there may be parts of the job that is not necessarily the most purposeful for me. And so I try hard to find whatever that purpose is and continue to focus on that. And ultimately, that correlates and connects back to so much of my personal brand.
Yeah. Too often I meet people, Jeffrey, where their work or their company is filling a hole for them. It's filling a void. And because of that, when the company goes away or something changes at the organization, there feels like there's this piece of them that's missing. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is don't let the company be filling a void for you. If anything, come into it as a whole person and let the work that you do be something that allows for you to activate your purpose.
100%.
Yeah.
And I would add on that entrepreneurial element, right? Because in this day and age, most companies are not loyal to their people. I, talk to chief human resource officers all the time. And They always want to make you feel that that's the truth, but the reality of it is they're not. We know that in the United States, here today and gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I think it's incredibly important that we really think about what our purpose is, what motivates us, what makes us get up every day and want to contribute, and not allow us to be beholden to our organization. Because one organizational restructure could mean your job is no longer there, or it could mean your boss, who you were loyal to, is no longer there. And that can change, as we know, so much too. And so, 100%, I think it's also about that harnessing and channeling not only our purpose, but also what it gets us excited about, what gives us joy in the work that we do. And then, sometimes it's a matter of thinking about other aspects outside of the current job that we can do that's going to also give us joy.
Yeah. Well, it's an inside job. That's what we're talking about here. It's an inside job. We're not getting it from out there.
Yeah.
We have it from within us, and then we celebrate it. We bring it out to the world. Now, I agree with you, and I appreciate the honesty in how you're describing it, which is it is transactional in many ways. Now, when something is transactional like that, uh, we have to realize there's two sides to it.
Hmm.
Meaning, yes, the organization can choose to say goodbye to you at any point, and you can choose to leave them at any point, right?
Yeah.
So the point I'm making there, Geoffrey, and I want to get your thoughts on it, is it doesn't mean you have to approach it with resentment. It doesn't mean you have to approach it with like,
Hmm.
oh, they don't care about me, and so I'm just going to do me and forget about them. No, no, no. That's an agreement. But can you approach that agreement with just objectivity without getting too caught up in it where, oh, they can just let me go whenever they want? You see what I'm saying?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think to your point, right? It's really that, it's really in some ways that sense of freedom to know. And this is why I think it's really important, because those of us that are comfortable with our personal brand, and when our personal brand is known in the world or in the nation and in the work that we do, you sort of it's not that you walk around, or do your work with like a chip on your shoulder, but
Right.
you do get to a point where you realize, I am a subject matter expert in the work that I do. I am a significant contributor. And if that organization or that leader isn't valuing that, there's going to be others that will.
Yeah.
And so, I think it really is, to your point, really taking it more to a strategic level mindset, and almost, yes, it's still transactional, 100%, but really thinking strategically. I have value. You have value. Your value is not 100% tied to the organization that you serve. Your value is actually you. And so it really is that kind of, for me, it's been a very introspective experience to say, I'll do everything to help them. But if I get to a point in time where I feel that I can't be as effective, then obviously I have to consider, what those options may be.
Yeah. And you've done a really great job of creating your personal brand. On LinkedIn, you have over 30,000 followers. You're posting regularly. You get tons of engagement, which is amazing. And you're talking about things that I think so many people can relate to. So I'd like to hear from you, what opportunities has that presented for you? What is it? What doors have opened because of your dedication to your personal brand?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, first and foremost, on the professional side, you know, for actually 5 out of the last jobs that I've had have entirely come through that LinkedIn network. They've not come through, you know, going the traditional means of applying for a job, etc. They've actually come through somebody else knowing me through there or introducing me through there on LinkedIn, and then, landing the opportunity. It's also been a space where I have been able to connect and engage in the startup community, and become an advisor to numerous startups and contribute to the work of amazing founders. In addition to, it's led to additional consulting opportunities that I've been able to work on and continue to work on. And it's also for me, as somebody that has an immense passion for public speaking, led me to have, more significant public speaking opportunities that I know I wouldn't necessarily have if I didn't have that personal brand. And so I will tell you that I get asked this question all the time, and it's really interesting when I reflect on it, that I don't know where I would be from a career perspective and even from a fulfillment perspective in the work that I do, and really finding the joy in it if it wasn't for so much of the LinkedIn community. Because some of the best friends that I have came through LinkedIn. Uh,
Mm.
would never have expected that, but truly, that has been just the beauty of it. And it also has been a great way to open up additional doors to networking and really building genuine connection that ultimately not only has served me extremely well, but it's also allowed me to mentor and coach others and give others that hope that I knew I needed at a point in my life where now I've been able to give it back.
Yeah. Everyone listening right now, please take note of what Geoffrey is saying. It's not to use LinkedIn only to submit your applications, to see what jobs are posted. It is to genuinely connect with the people on that platform. I had the same experience as you, Geoffrey. You and I connected through a mutual friend,
Hmm.
Jonathan Fisher,
Yeah.
who is a great friend of mine now, and I only met him through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I have a ton of people I have connected with through LinkedIn. Some are friends, some have become clients, some I've worked with and collaborated on with projects. But it wasn't as though I went into it thinking, what am I going to get out of this?
Mhm.
Right? It was to go into it with just, I want to connect, I want to explore, I want to see what potential synergies there are here. And that led to opportunities growing. So there's a bit of a long game there, which is to not approach it where, oh, I'm just going to hope that I could get my resume out there and someone's going to accept me and take me in. It's more of, how do I build relationships?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, right? I mean, even my job at Siemens, I met my boss through, initially connecting on LinkedIn, and then had an opportunity to invite him to a national healthcare forum, and never would have expected that 3 months after that he was after me to consider an opportunity. And to your exact point, this is where people have to really pay attention. I will tell you that even on the personal end, and you heard me reference this on the friendship side, I just had an opportunity recently to meet up with a dear friend that I've now, talked to for several years, almost 4 years on LinkedIn, just for the first time met in person. And he's, it's funny, we both said to each other, it's almost like we had met 200 times. But, this was our first time in person, and immediately we were already planning the next, and those types of things. But the reality of it is that we become not just friends, but confidants for one another, and helping one another through different experiences that we're going through in life. And I think that's where people have sort of missed the understanding here, that really it was developed as a community. And I spoke, I have had the privilege to meet one of the original leaders, executives at LinkedIn, in my work. And he has said to me multiple times, we developed it as a platform to bring people together.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. And I think that's what people have to remember, especially at a time where we have more isolation, we have more crisis of mental health, we have people feeling like no one's paying attention to them. We need those outlets that bring people together. And the workplace should be a place that does that.
Yeah. And the wonderful thing about LinkedIn is that it isn't a place where people are hiding behind masks and
Mhm.
are trolling one another and posturing. It's a place where there is genuine support and positivity. Now, just like anything, if you look for negativity, sure, you'll find it. So just don't look for it. What I find is that LinkedIn has only been a place that has, I've seen, lifts people up.
Yeah.
And if you approach it with that positive attitude and that genuine means or genuine desire to connect, you're gonna get wonderful opportunities presented to you, and you have a wonderful example of that. Now, I think there's something that I actually wanted to ask you about. I wrote it down because I saw it in one of your posts. It was something about, and you brought up some great leaders that you've worked with. And LinkedIn offers us the opportunity to connect. And you said one of the leaders that you work with now, that's through your LinkedIn connection. And you said how growth and learning is more accessible with the guidance of mentors and the support of remarkable leaders.
Hmm.
So tell me about how the leaders that you have worked with have impacted you, how the leaders have had that kind of effect on your career.
Yeah. So I referenced earlier my first job, which, is the longest tenure of my career. And when HR loves to ask those questions when you're in interview processes, because they always want to see why is this person jumping around? And, as a millennial, I regularly say to HR, this is one of the reasons why you can't hire and recruit and retain millennials, because you ask these questions. Those questions have no place in the workplace. The reality of it is that uh, younger generations like myself will stay in an organization if we feel valued, heard, respected, and we feel that sense of belonging. And we will also stay if we're invested in from a growth and development standpoint. When I was in my first organization, I was fortunate and blessed to come into an organization that when I started, I was the youngest in my team, and mentorship was very abound there. It was just very much a part of the DNA of our organization. And at the time, my senior vice president took me under his wing, and it became truly a beautiful relationship. The irony is that I would never expect it. In many ways, I became like a son to him. And unfortunately, he lost his son early on in my tenure there. And, I almost not only became a son to him, but I also became somebody that helped him through that, tragic loss. And his son was similar age to me. And, but what he did for me, and there were times, as a millennial, right? Sometimes we know it all. Sometimes we're a bit over our head and with our thinking, where I would say to him, like, oh, this job is just not for me. And he would look at me and say, look, I'm going to tell you, Geoffrey, healthcare is the most special place to serve. And you have so much profound opportunity to make a difference in another person's life. You can try something else out, but I guarantee you will make it back into healthcare. And, I can remember just sitting back every time he said this to me and thinking, wow, like, he's obviously been in this for 40 years, well accomplished, could do whatever he wants, could have gone to be a CEO, didn't want to. That was not what he wanted. And so I would always just listen to him and, times be a little frustrated, but just continue to do the work. And he just continued to mentor me, would put me on new projects, new initiatives, promoted me multiple times. And then there came an opportunity where he did something with another colleague that's usually unheard of. He went to the CEO and said to the CEO, Geoffrey has a bright future, but the best situation is if he moves under you. And, he moved me out of his area to report to the CEO. Now, the CEO and I had a very, very close relationship. She was already mentoring me, coaching me, taking me under her wing to experience things that as a young 20-some-year-old, I never would get that experience. She was already treating me as if I was like her right hand. And when they made the move, it was intentional because she felt and he felt, they both felt that I could grow further, certainly with reporting into the senior vice president. But if I wanted to have a larger organizational responsibility and be seen further by others in the organization, this move would make a big difference. And so ultimately led to additional promotions, additional opportunities. But what was most profound was while I was doing that, they both said to me, you got to go on and get your master's. We know you need to do this. We know you can do it. And they supported me. They made all the moves that were possible. They made me miss meetings. They made me do things because they cared that much about me. They did things from a continuing education standpoint. I, was just totally blessed to have had every opportunity. And I'll tell you, you hear a lot of employers and employee, organizations talk about kind of a family-like feel. I don't usually like to use that word, but I will say that our organization with our CEO and the senior vice president, we had a very community feel. So much so that when I would bring my children, when I would bring family, they always knew every aspect about them. and they would spend time with them. They would bring them in and invite them. They
Mm.
did Christmas parties. We did, different things like that. And I'll tell you where I saw the difference really happen. Um, in 2014, I was there. Obviously, I was in a leadership role, and tragically lost my brother. And when you go through those situations, people are going to be there for you. But what you never realize, uh, at least for me, is how much your workplace colleagues are paramount to help you through a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I will never forget giving my brother's eulogy and looking back into that funeral home and seeing that not only there were family, friends, but it was so full of colleagues. And I remember sitting back and saying, how blessed am I to work in an organization that, literally, a hospital, mind you, had that many people give up their time to be there for me and my family. And I mean the executive leadership team. My CEO, who was my mentor, was no longer the CEO at that time. She was still there. The CEO who replaced her, they didn't have the greatest relationship. They sat next to each other. Really profound types of things. And so what I saw in that experience was people who cared about people. And that's what I want to see in more organizations today is we have to be there for one another at our highs, at our lows, and all the in-betweens. And I'm just afraid that from a leadership standpoint, from a professional standpoint, we've really lost a lot of that. And I know I wouldn't be sitting here and doing the work that I'm doing if I didn't have them first, and then through that whole trajectory, having their support, through all of that.
It sounds like you had an incredible experience of people who saw you as a human being and cared about your well-being, your happiness, your success, to offer the kind of advice on what to do with your education, to then be there for you during a time of loss, of tragedy. Those are powerful examples, and I'm I wish I heard more of those stories. I too often hear other stories where it is completely transactional and people are not being treated as people. And I think it's a good opportunity to segue a bit into Tara's story here, because one of the things that is highlighted in her story is how she gets so invigorated by the vision of the leadership when she interviews for the startup.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things happening at her current job where it feels like she's not being heard. She's
Mm-hmm.
not being understood. So when you think about your career and how you prioritize what's important to you, how much of an investment are you putting into, okay, I need to have a leader that I can really feel excited to work for? How much of a weight do you place on that? And I ask that considering with Tara how that would help her in making her decision.
Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, because we spend so much time in the workplace, having a leader that respects us, hears us, sees us, gives us that time is truly the most critical. For me, I've talked about the best leaders I've had, but I've also had some of the worst leaders. And, I've been in organizations where at the highest level of the organizations, I have seen the destruction that a leader can do, not just to an organization, but to people. And, when I think of, someone like Tara, and when I think of my own experiences, there's nothing better that any of us can do. But I also understand it's not easy. But there's nothing better that any of us can do but to get out of a situation when we're in that. The
Mm.
longer we stay, and continue to feel what really can be like abuse, what can feel like bullying, what can feel like just somebody treating me so terribly, it will truly tear us apart. I look at it from the mind, body, spirit. It's going to impact us in every possible way. And it will absolutely impact us on our personal lives too, because how much we spend professionally impacts us personally. And so, uh, having a leader that inspires us, gives us confidence, coaches us, yes, holds us accountable. That's the piece that's interesting here, because I often hear people, and I get challenged on this too. You're always talking about connecting at the heart and always talking about how leaders should be compassionate, empathetic, but you never talk about holding them accountable. And I always say, at the heart of leadership is accountability. It is about responsibility. But I've had leaders that can do both. And so I don't buy the argument that you can't also be an empathetic leader, that you can't be a compassionate leader, that you can't just be a good person or a good human being, because you can. And so when I think of Tara, and I think of particularly, talking to a family member about an opportunity and them saying, well, they've really been good to you. Let me just say this: no one knows what it's like to walk in our shoes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there with us those 8+ hours. And they're not in the room when you walk out of there and think, did I really just hear that? I think those of us, probably many of us, that have worked for leaders who tear us apart rather than lift us up, know what what it feels like, and know how every day you're walking out thinking there's nothing more that I can do. And you're walking in with the worst anxiety that you could possibly feel. And you never know whether you're going to get torn down again.
Yeah. The situation there with her father is an interesting one. You just brought it up. I've had that experience personally, and I've had those conversations where, oh, but you have such a great role. It's such a nice company to work for. You have all those benefits. Why would you leave? And what I learned is that what's happening is that this person who I love, who I care for, and the person I'm thinking right now is my mother. That's who is
Mhm.
on my mind. I know she's coming from a place where she is offering advice that she feels will help me to be secure, where
Mhm.
she wants to be sure that I'm safe. And she's projecting whatever fears are coming up within her onto my situation.
Yep.
But her fears do not need to be my fears.
Mhm.
And I can listen to her with compassion and disagree with her assessment at the same time. And before we started recording, you said that you've had this experience as well. So walk me through it. What was it like for you when you said, hey, I think I want to go in this direction, but someone close to you was saying, no, 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 play it safe.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And similarly, it was my parents. And, you know, I can remember in that situation, I can remember I said to them, look, we are a different generation. You may have been okay to sit in an organization and see others getting torn apart. I'm not. And so, and I can remember, you know, one of my parents said, I think you're making a mistake. And I said, well, I guess it'll be a mistake I'll own then, because I'm not going to continue to sit there and see and take that. And in my circumstance, not only was I experiencing it, but others in the organization were experiencing it. And so, in my mindset in that type of situation was I did everything I possibly could to try to change it. That didn't happen. And so then I knew either I had to make a choice. Either I was going to stick here and just continue to take that abuse from a CEO who shouldn't even be close to that type of a role ever, or I was going to leave. And so, you know what? I said, I'm going to leave. And uh, fortunately for me, I left and I took some of those other people with me so that they also could get away from that. And, it's interesting, right? Because after the fact, loving parents say, wow, you made a good move. I see. So sometimes it's, again, they don't know. Like to your exact point, they're trying to be helpful. But when someone like Tara is facing that, which there's so many people out there who are going to face this, not just from parents, but best friends, mentors, coaches, what I tell them all the time is you have to trust your gut. You have to really think about it from the mind, body, spirit perspective. Yes, could there be risk in the decision? Absolutely. Yes, there could be. But when you have an opportunity that may allow you to get out of an environment that could be damaging you physically, mentally, in a health perspective, in a safety perspective, there is nothing more important than that.
Yeah.
And frankly, sometimes we have to make those moves for others to realize how bad it really is. And I've seen that. And I've been a catalyst for that in other organizations where, me moving, me leaving
Yep.
led to others leaving and ultimately led to the board coming back and saying that president has to leave. And, sometimes you have to be willing to do that. And you have to also, and it's not easy to your exact point, you also have to realize that depending on where their advice is coming from, it's very different. If they're from a different generation, they didn't think of leaving. They were loyal. It's not that we're also not loyal in different generations. It's just that we're not going to just deal with it anymore. We will vote with our feet and we will make decisions that are truly in the best interests for us. I know some people want to call that selfish, but I will tell you that I see no selfishness in that. What I see is we are going to prioritize our psychological health and safety because we know that if we are psychologically health and safe, we can help others to be psychologically health and safe.
Yeah. To show that kind of courage, to be bold in that way, will then enable others to follow suit.
Yep.
It will then create the shifts within our companies or organizations to prioritize every employee's well-being, health, psychological safety versus just the bottom line. And to your point, it needs to be actions that we take. It can't just be the conversations at the water cooler. We have to do things in order to see some change. Now, one thing I think that is coming up for Tara in this story is a decision, which
Mhm.
is I have this one company that offers me, some sense of uh, comfort because I worked here for long. I have that sense of loyalty, right? And then I have this other opportunity. Do you have, Geoffrey, a process or a criteria that you work through when making a decision like that? Do you consider certain factors and kind of prioritize things to be able to decide? I heard you say a moment ago, trust your gut. And of course, that's a component. But how do you work through that yourself?
Mhm.
And that way, I guess we could consider how we would advise Tara to do the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. So, at least in my experience, there's been a couple ways that I'll work through it. One, and I always encourage everyone to have this. Everyone should have a personal board of advisors. It's a group of a couple people who are like mentors, but also individuals that you certainly don't want people who are just going to agree with you. You want people who are also going to challenge you,
Yeah.
mentor you, coach you, but at the same time are in your area of industry, and potentially could be a boss, a former boss, could be somebody you've worked with, but it's really helpful because when you have a group of people that you can go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, tell me what you think. And in those circumstances, what I have found is sometimes they will further encourage me to ask additional questions so that I could try to really get at, am I really sure the grass is going to be greener? because we also never know that either.
Hmm.
And I think that's the tough thing about interviewing, right? Is yes, we're being interviewed, but we have to do just as much interviewing. And even then, you're not going to get a true sense of the full environment and community until you get in there. And so it's certainly helpful to do that. I also obviously spent a lot of time, checking out different things on LinkedIn about the organization. Are people commenting or posting, not just on LinkedIn, but other places about the organization? Are they commenting about leadership? Are they commenting about culture? Because it's important that we get a sense of that type of stuff. And I'll tell you, like if you find that they're not commenting, you also have to also ask yourself too, why is that? Are they
Mm.
afraid? Because ultimately, um, we also have to be mindful of, even if an employer wins best employer workplace, that doesn't mean it's a great place. That just may mean they had a couple good months, and that's when they got assessed. And those couple good months may have been organized around bonuses and bumps in pay, and hence when they got surveyed, people were happy. That's the reality of best places to work surveys. And so we also have to be honest about those types of things too. And so first, I would say personal board of advisors, have that, talk to them, get their sense. Certainly make sure you have an alignment with the mission, vision, and values. That's going to be incredibly important. Certainly do your homework, get a sense of any additional information that you can find, that you can ascertain, and then make sure in the conversations you're having, particularly with the potential hiring manager and human resources, that you're asking the most important questions. The worst thing you could do is to make that move and then get in there and think, oh my gosh, here, look what I just did. We really have to spend a lot of time in that process thinking about what is the right fit for us. Just because a bump in pay doesn't mean it's a right fit necessarily. Yes, that can be important for us, potentially, for all of us. But what is it about the job, organization, culture that could make it the right fit? And then make sure you do your homework to really ascertain that as much as possible. And, I would also be bold. Tell the organization, I want to talk to somebody else in the organization that may be on the team. I want to have a conversation with them to ask them what it truly is like. See if they're willing to give you that opportunity. Because ultimately, if they're not, that says a lot about them too. If they're an organization that truly knows they have a good culture, they're going to absolutely give you an opportunity to speak to somebody else. I've heard some organizations start to actually allow candidates to come on site almost like a shadowing experience. And I think when organizations do that kind of stuff, they're showing you they're not afraid of anything. They believe very strongly in their culture. I think we need to get to more of those types of things because we need to spend time to truly be able to sense it and get it. And I'm not suggesting one day is enough, but it certainly gives more than just a one person call or a committee interview. We've got to have a little bit more intentionality around these things.
Yeah. I love that question. That's bold, man. I've never heard anybody directly ask that in an interview, and I think that that is an incredible thing to present cuz you're absolutely right. If you have nothing to hide, then why would you say no to that? Why would you not allow me to speak to somebody at the organization that is not posturing in the interview to try to make the organization look so perfect? And I use this analogy a lot, Geoffrey. It's going to an ice cream shop and wanting to know what the flavor of ice cream tastes like before you make your order.
Hmm.
Every ice cream shop offers you a sample. Well, most do. If they don't, I don't know. It's not a very good ice cream shop to go to. But you get the sample, right? So what you're outlining, and I think you really covered so many of the things that I think anybody who puts in practice will get the sample. If you just go through a process of getting your sample, you've at least done everything in your power to be able to get a sense of, is this really what this ice cream is going to taste like? Will I enjoy this ice cream when I finish this cup or this cone? And so one of the One of the things that I found to be the most important, I learned this from a VP at Tesla years ago. Because I remember when I left Tesla, I was like, what do I want to do? Do I want to start another job somewhere else? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? Do I want to get into this? And he kind of leveled me. He hit me. He was one of my personal advisors at the time, as you were describing before. He said, whatever you decide, remember, it's going to be 40 hours out of your week plus. Will you love it? Will you love it? He said, just simple. Will you love doing it? Before anything else, before even compensation, culture, anything, will you love that activity day in and day out?
It's powerful.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's so easy to get overcomplicated with these things, right? It's like we can go into all the other things about the benefits and the PTO time and, when will I get promoted and all that. And we forget, well, the actual experience of it, as you were saying before, the person who's telling you don't do it, they don't know what it's like for you 8 hours a day. They're not doing that experience. So gather as much of what that experience will be like to be able to assess if this is going to be the right decision. And I think that's paired with, will the leader that I work for be someone who I will learn from, that cares about me as a human being and that I can be inspired by. So to try and summarize things, I like to present a scenario towards the end of our conversation. So I'm going to put you in this little scenario. Okay. I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine Tara is leaving the office late. She's hungry. She goes to a restaurant and she wants to have dinner. There's only one seat at the bar available. They said you could sit there. She goes, she sits there, and she orders her meal. To the right is you. You're sitting next to her, okay? You're eating your dinner. You had a speaking engagement in her town, and you were hungry. You went out for dinner, okay? And somehow a conversation sparks between you two, and she tells you about her scenario. You now know her story. You're about to get the check, and you have this one window of opportunity to give her advice. You can just share one thing with her before you leave, before you pay the check. What do you say?
I would definitely say to her, I would emphasize with her that I've also been in her shoes and help her to understand that she has to make the decision that's in her best interest. Ultimately, she has to, separate out what her father and others may be saying. And really, to your exact point, really hone in on, is this the right opportunity for me? And if she can effectively answer that question, I would tell her go for it. And not worry at all about what others think. Because ultimately, when we do that, we're also just further tearing ourselves apart. We have to really be bold and really just think deeply about what we want and what's going to give us that joy in the work that we do, and make the decision.
I love it. Great stuff. Geoffrey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Anyone listening, you need to connect with Geoffrey Roche on LinkedIn. His content is amazing. He offers insights into how to have a more meaningful, impactful career, but it's also well beyond career. You talk about things just as a human being. And I feel like anybody who's looking to stay motivated, to be able to understand what it takes to be able to have an impactful, meaningful life and career will get value out of following you. So find Geoffrey on LinkedIn, follow, send him a connection request. I think you'll really enjoy his content. Geoffrey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you, Jay, as well. I really appreciated the conversation.
What I love about hosting this podcast is I get to learn with you from these incredible guests that we bring on, these experts, because I listen to the podcast again. I of course, I'm having the conversation with the guest, but then I play it back afterwards so that I can synthesize the conversation into our insights and our actionable takeaways. Let's identify what they are for our insights. The first one, you are your brand, not your company. Sure, you are contributing towards the organization, but you are offering a unique value contribution, and therefore that work is going towards your own personal brand. And you need to be able to not only see it that way, but to take actions and walk the walk accordingly. Second insight, know your purpose and connect to your purpose. So the work that you're doing needs to get you excited and energized towards a purpose that is one you define, not the company. Sure, they could align, but it needs to be one where you are aligning that purpose towards your career trajectory and the kind of impact you want to make. Third insight, trust your gut and do what's best for you. If you're not feeling like the leader that you're working with is one that inspires you and you're not growing under, then it may mean you need to make a decision for yourself, because as Geoffrey pointed to multiple times, mind, body, spirit is what you need to prioritize. And you need to have the courage to make a decision that will be best for you, even if it means on the surface, others may see it as you being disloyal. Actionable takeaways. First of the 3 actionable takeaways, genuinely connect with people on LinkedIn. Do this, yes, there's branding, there's opportunities it could open for you, but make it about relationships. This is a long game to be able to have that kind of interaction on LinkedIn, to really make it about the connection, not about getting some sort of short-term result. Second actionable takeaway, leverage your personal board of advisors. I love the way he termed that. Have your own board of advisors, people that you can turn to that won't just agree with everything you say, but they will challenge you when you have to make an important career decision. Third actionable takeaway, be bold and ask questions. When you're in that interviewing process, ask the important questions, and even go as far. I love the question he brought up of, can I speak with someone else at your company? Because in the end, in the interview, they're going to posture and they're going to polish their presentation to make it seem like everything is perfect. But you have the right to ask. And if they're not willing to introduce you to somebody, then they might be hiding something. And he also gave that advice of looking at LinkedIn and seeing if the people at the organization are commenting or engaging. I thought that was an interesting one, because it does give you a sense of how they're feeling about their work. And if everyone's quiet, it might be because they're afraid to share what's really going on. Join us on our next episode. We're going to be doing another one of those short episodes. I've really enjoyed doing those. And in it, I'm going to walk you through how you can do some objective analysis when having to make a decision in your career. I call it the 4 criteria for any career decision. I'm a big advocate for tapping into and tuning into your intuition. Geoffrey brought it up in this conversation. And that makes up, to me, at least 50%. And you also want to do some objective analysis here and think through a few specific areas. And I will guide you through that in our podcast on Friday. Reminder, if you're watching this on YouTube, I don't post it on YouTube. It's just on your podcast platform of choice. So be sure to listen into it. And that will be coming out on Friday. So until next time, thank you for listening.